then you would write down the word house. And you would say, this is a house. And then you just let the child see the word at the same time the child hears the word. If you do this on a consistent basis, then your child will learn many, many new words. And then eventually your child will figure out that the B makes the bus sound, just like they figure out all the other patterns in language. In the video, we do have some phonics sections where we're specifically trying to teach the child phonics. For instance, we have the word cat in here, we have hat, we have that, mat, sat, and so on. And just from having the words next to each other in some of the sections, the child will figure out the at family, okay? So your child will learn phonics by doing this. You can do extra phonics. If you have an older child, you will need to do extra phonics activities, but with the babies and toddlers, you don't need to do the extra phonics activities, and the children will figure it out just from the phonics activities we already have in the video. When you go to the library, I actually recommend checking out hundreds of books from the library. If you have a lot of new books around the house, you will find that you are more interested in reading the books because you've already read every single baby book that you have many, many times, and you'll find that your interest goes up, your child's interest will go up, you will find many topics that the child is interested in from doing this. When you're reading to your child, that is not going to teach your child to read. It is not. And most of the books have too many words and they're too small, and most of the books have a picture and then the word, okay? In this book, you'll notice we have a big word, and if you point to this and say nose, this is my nose, then you touch the child's nose, and then you lift it up, or if the child's older, then you ask the child to touch his or her nose. Then you can ask the child to touch the baby's nose, and then you can point if the child's not able to, and just talk about the nose, and then you would go back and say nose. This is the word nose. This is my nose. This is, and then say your child's name, that child's nose, and so on. So these kinds of books are hard to find where there are only one word on the page. I think we have the only books that I've ever seen like this where there's a word and then the picture. Most of the other books will have a picture first and then the word. So what happens is the child immediately thinks of what it is because they see the picture, and then they don't have to think about the word. So these books can be used to teach reading. Most books are not used to teach reading. You can find a few books where there are only a few words per page. When you're reading those books with your child, with a young baby, you would point to each word as you say it. With an older child, you would teach the child to point to the words while you are reading to the child. And then eventually, the child will read some of the words. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So I'll take any questions that anyone has. Thank you very much, and ask any question whatsoever that you have.
Hi there, my name's Christy. I had a question for you. Is 5 years too old to start the child on the program?
Okay, very good question. 5 is not too old, but 5 is near the end of the window. The window actually begins to close at age 4 for learning language very naturally and very easily. It's still easier at age 5 than it will be at age 6. So I always tell parents if they have a 5-year-old to try to put as much time and energy into helping them learn to read, because there are studies showing that if a child cannot read at grade level by the end of 1st grade, fewer than 1 in 8 ever catch up to read at grade level again. So I think it should be a focus, and I highly recommend turning off the TV as much as possible. I have not really talked about it. Sometimes I will talk for 15 minutes straight about how important it is to not watch TV. Parents should not be putting one video on after another, and I don't think the focus of your family life should revolve around the children watching TV while you're doing something else. So 5 is not too late, and I would just, in addition to watching the videos still work at age 5. We have had children at age 6 and even 7 and 8 who have used the videos and learned to read, but at age 5 you will have to do a little bit more of a phonics approach, and you will need to do other activities. It's a little bit more work and effort at age 5 than it is at age 2, for instance. So if you do what I said about going to the library, you'll find some of those books will only have a few words per page. Use those books to teach reading. Most of the other books you'll be reading just for the love or the joy of reading, but you will also need to use other methods to teach your 5-year-old to read.
I started using Your Baby Can Read program when my daughter was just over a year, and we used it really consistently for about 9 months. And she wasn't watching any other television, and I really noticed her picking up concepts and
Good.
being able to point out everything. And then when I started working full-time and she was spending time in other places, she started watching other television shows,
Right.
and we kind of stopped using it a bit. And now, I'm finding I really want to start encouraging it again.
Right. How old is she now?
Now she's just over 2.
Okay.
So 26 months.
Okay.
And I'm wondering, should I start at the beginning again? Or,
Okay. Very good question. If you've used the program, left for a while, and then are coming back, you'll go at a much faster pace the second time around. So instead of watching the starter DVD for a full month, you'll watch for maybe a couple of days, and then move on to the next one, and then review the starter DVD. And for most of the parents, if you go on to the DVD and go on to the parent instructions, there's a schedule there for you to look at. So typically the child would watch the starter DVD for 1 month, then move to volume 1 for 2 months. And while watching volume 1, the child would go back and review the starter DVD. In your case, instead of watching for a month, it will probably be only a few days and then move on. But you have to show all 5 of the DVDs, not just one of them, because the child has already seen them and has probably already learned many of the words. You don't want to show the same one too many times. Probably more important for you would be to go back to how you were forming your television viewing and your family life, which I would say, I don't care how much the child wants to watch certain shows. At age 2, the child doesn't know that watching one mindless program after another is going to have negative consequences on the child. You do know it, but your child doesn't know it. So if you don't take control over your TV at age 2, it's so much more difficult to wait until they're 3 or 4 or 5. I highly recommend that you decide what your child is going to watch, and you don't do it because you're busy and you know the child will watch this program, so you'll put that one on because you're busy. That's not how you decide what is in your child's best interest. You decide, is the program educational? Is it interactive? Is there some benefit to the child by watching the program? And if you go back to that, then everything will work much, much, much better than if the child is watching too many TV shows. Okay.
By using this program from such a young age, can it at all prevent or help prevent child learning disabilities like dyslexia or ADHD or anything like that?
Very good question. Actually, according to a national panel of reading specialists and early childhood educators, most of our nation's reading problems could be completely prevented, including dyslexia. Dyslexia is the most common learning disability that we have in the United States. And it could be completely prevented, according to a national panel of reading specialists, if we did 2 things. 1 is to teach reading earlier, and 2 is to not focus on either a phonics or a whole language approach, but do a combination of the 2. So if you do that, it will help. I've gone to scientific conferences where I've shown the video, and a lot of people have seen the arrow, and they notice that all the babies will look at the arrow from left to right. The reason babies look at the arrow is because infants' vision is attracted to motion. That's why I put it in there to begin with, so that they would learn to look at words from left to right. But the people who study dyslexia have told me that they come up with all these sophisticated, fancy programs, vision programs, where they're moving objects all around to try to teach them to look at words from left to right. And when they see this, they think, oh, that's a good idea. Because you don't need to look from left to right all the time. You just need to look when you're reading or when you're crossing the road in certain places and so on. You need to look from left to right sometimes and right to left other times. Okay?
My son started it too,
Okay?
and he would just sit and watch the video. My daughter at 2 runs around and looks at the video when it's the music, or hands up, or, but usually she's just running around and every once in a while focuses on the video. Is she getting the same thing out of it as he did?
That's a very good question. Now, your son is how old now?
5.
He's 5, and he started at age
2.
2, and when did he start reading?
6 weeks later.
6 weeks later. Okay, that is really fast. Usually, instead of learning to read in 6 weeks, it usually takes about 6 months. Your daughter is 2?
Yep, she just turned
Okay.
2.
There are many children, I call them active children, and if you have an active child who just doesn't stay seated very much, then there are many different strategies you can use to help the child focus longer, because the child at age 2 who is running around is not getting the same out of it as someone who's sitting there and really focused. So you want the child to focus more. One thing you can do is dim the lights. If you dim the lights, then the TV will be brighter. It's just like if we go to the theater and all the lights are out, it's easy to just focus on what's happening right in front of us. So I think that really works very well. Also, remove all the distractions from the environment before you begin. Pick up all the toys, everything else before you begin, wherever you're going to be showing the video. Don't do it right as you're beginning, because as you pick up something, then they get interested in whatever it is you're removing. So do it before you begin. Also, you can try when she's eating finger food, sitting at a high chair, and you can get in the habit of feeding her while she's watching the video at lunch. I'm not trying to take away from any family time sitting together as a family and eating. I'm really not. But sometimes we are busy and we're not always eating together as a family. So during those times, you can show the video while she's eating. If you do not watch other TV, and if she's not watching any of the mindless TV shows that are often called educational programs, then it definitely works much better. And since your son is reading so well, I really want your daughter to read at the same level. So sometimes with the second child, parents are occupied more with the first child, and we don't always put the same time and energy in. I'm just telling you, try your very best for your second child to put as much time and energy as you can in early on, and that is something you will never regret. And if you don't do it, you may have regrets later. So try also just doing it 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, before or after a nap. Maybe you can go and do physical activities and then come back after you've gotten her really tired. Then you can sit there and watch the video with her. You can sit with her and clap and do all the actions. All these different ways will make it more likely that she'll want to watch.
What's the first thing she asks for when we walk in the door?
Oh, very good. So she
she
likes to
wants-
watch
she loves
it.
to watch
It's
it.
just her concentration is not as long.
She wants to watch it and run around.
Okay. Well, actually, we have had a
'Cause
lot
it's not
of...
necessarily like she's picking up with toys or anything.
Right.
She just,
Oh, so she's just physically moving. As long as
Yeah.
she's looking when the words come up, then I would just let her run around. If she is running around, but when the words come up, you notice that she stops to look at the words, then I would just continue the way you are doing it. We've had many, many, many children learn to read who did the exact same thing. They weren't sitting and focused. But sitting and being focused, sometimes that works better. But some children are just not inclined to sit as long. Okay. Other questions? Okay.
At what age do you introduce a second language?
Okay. Well, in studies about learning a second language, the earlier the child is taught a second language, the more efficient the brain develops for learning the second language. So if you have a child who learns from birth through age 4, they have one large area of the brain that's active, whether the child is speaking or thinking in the first language or the second language. If you learn at age 5 all the way up until age 10, then you still have that first area, first language. So let's say this is English, and if the second language is Spanish, then you would have an adjacent area that would be active if the child would be thinking or speaking in Spanish. This area is smaller, and as the child gets older, it gets smaller and smaller and a little bit farther away from the area for the first language. How we're currently doing it is we're generally waiting until the child is in high school in most communities. In some areas it's middle school. Sometimes they say they have second language programs in elementary school, but often they're just counting or just doing very basic things. So the earlier you do it, the better, and the easier it will be for your child to learn the language. I tell parents that they should consider their family backgrounds and decide which language. Obviously, if one of the spouses knows a language, then it's easier to teach that language. But think about which language you want. You also might want to try to guess at which languages would be better for your child to learn 15 or 20 years from now. So just think about which languages might benefit your child the most. For every child, they would benefit learning a second language, I believe, because for one thing, in the university, the child has to have a second language. And I don't know how many of you struggled to learn a second language, but I did. And that was something that I had to take it in college. And I had to study, and I had to work. That would just be one more thing that would be easy for your child. Just to make sure I'm clear, the answer is the earlier, the better. And when you're teaching a second language, you want to speak in complete thoughts in English and complete thoughts in the other language. You don't want to mix within a sentence the two languages.
Right.
That's about the worst thing that you can do for teaching a second language. There are some TV shows that are called educational where that's exactly what they do in the TV show. They'll speak in English, and then the last word of the sentence, they'll say it in Spanish. And the children who watch that show will speak in the same way. So I highly recommend that you don't do that. As long as you don't do that, and as long as you talk a lot in both languages, then the child will learn very naturally and very easily. If you don't speak a second language yourself, but you want to teach your child a second language, then it's a lot more difficult. Then you want to use DVDs, you want to use books in the other languages, you want to use audio tapes, you want to find a group of people where you can meet maybe once every 2 weeks where someone is teaching the language. So you can find friends in most places around the country where someone speaks a second language. And if you can't, then go to the library and go to other community resources and ask about where you can find class. And you can take classes with your baby. Your baby will learn very quickly the second language, and you will, at first it will seem like you are learning the language faster because the child won't be saying it, but a year later you'll see that the child has actually learned a lot more than what you will learn.
Okay. My question relates to, you've mentioned a few concepts in your videos that children seem to kind of pick up on their own and realize on their own. And I'm wondering how that relates to individual letters.
Okay,
so
good question.
When a child, associates this group of letters with this meaning, are they memorizing, the letters put together? Or at what point can they take that letter and put it with this word?
Okay.
Is that part of the program or something that comes along much later?
With individual letters, initially the babies are memorizing the shape of the word. It's a blob to them. If I hold up this word babies, initially it's just some blob, some shape. In the DVDs, I actually use many different fonts and I use many different colors. So we have different background colors and different text colors, many different fonts. They're being taught that it's the shape of the word that's important. It's not the color, it's not all the individual differences there, it's a general shape. Over time, they figure out without being told that this part of the shape, even if they don't know it's called a B, makes the B sound, okay? So I'll use my own children as examples, but I've heard the same stories from many other parents all over the place. If they follow my advice, which is you do not need to teach them the names of these individual letters, as if you talk with people who teach reading, you'll see that that doesn't really help them learn to read any words, okay? What a lot of people are doing now is actually teaching the sounds of the letters. The sounds would make a lot more sense than the names of the letters, but I know that in kindergarten, the teacher's going to expect they know the names of the letters and they're going to be judged by whether or not they know the names of these letters. So you have to teach them the names of the letters. Once they can read many words, then when you try to teach them the names of the letters, it will be just like the objects I was talking about earlier. So if you think of the microphone that you're holding there, if a child has never seen a microphone, and the child knows at least 50 words, you point to the microphone one time and say microphone, and the child will learn it. Well, the same is true with these letters. The child sees a B, and the child will figure out that that B, that this shape, if you just show the B, the child will know that's a B, because the child has seen this B so many thousands of times in so many words that usually the children are actually interested that they have individual names. I remember my daughter Alika just being fascinated that they had names. She learned the names of the alphabet in about 5 minutes. Many, many children have done exactly the same thing. They can learn in a few minutes because they have seen them so many thousands of times that it becomes a more concrete object. Instead of, for the children who don't know how to read, this is a very abstract shape. They have no idea what it is, how it's used, or anything else, and we're trying to teach them something that's extremely abstract. This is not abstract because when they see the word baby, then they see a baby. It's very concrete for them. Did I explain the whole thing, or do you have more?
Makes a lot more sense.
All right.
So it's probably a pretty smooth transition from these words that they learn on your programs to being able to pick up a book and be able to, assign these letters to different words and be able
Positively. So what would happen then is about the first 100 words, they're mostly just learning individual words. But we have many babies where if we hold up the word, I was giving a talk in St. Louis, for instance, and this baby must have read 50 words in a row. Little baby, she read every single word, but the one that everyone remembered was when I accidentally held the word upside down. I was not doing this on purpose, I just accidentally held it upside down. And she flipped the card, she said, oops, and flipped the card back over. And that surprised people the most because, and this happened with both of my children, where if I would hold it upside down, it wouldn't be on purpose. I just am this way where I would make a lot of mistakes. They would turn their heads upside down or they would flip it over for me. And by 12 months of age, they would do this because they already recognized enough words. So that means they had not just learned the individual words, but they had a general idea in their heads about what words look like. And if you show something upside down and it has at least 4 letters or so, then it probably doesn't look like a word. Okay? Thank you.
Can you use the same flashcard concept with numbers? Will they?
Oh.
Will they remember like 1 + 2 if you show it on a card?
Okay.
And will they be able to read and learn how to count and add and subtract?
Okay, with numbers, I don't recommend focusing on the numeral. So here's the numeral 3, okay? Most parents are focused on the numerals and not the concept of number. The concept of number is more important. So having 3 objects, for instance, here are three objects. This would be 3, okay? And you would do that with many different things. I would do it while counting. Why don't I just talk about how you can do activities related to numbers? And hopefully that will answer your question. I would not do it with cards necessarily. I would try to do it with concrete objects as much as possible. So you can count when you're walking with your child. How old is your child?
She's 18 months. 18
months. So she's already climbing stairs, for instance. So every time you climb stairs, you could count each step as you go. It will slow you down. Sometimes you have to pick her up and jog if you're in a hurry. But you can do the counting. Every time you do it, you should count. You should count when you are playing with toys. You'll want to specifically point out, could you please hand me 2 blue Legos or 2 of these or 2 of those or whatever? You want to talk and say numbers while the child is playing with certain numbers of objects. What I'm really saying is bring it into the child's everyday activities. Whenever the child is playing, that is the perfect opportunity to talk about numbers or many other concepts. When the child is eating, I remember we ate lots of round food, and I would cut their food into fractions. And I can remember with Keelan, I would cut her food into fractions, and initially I would do things like 2 halves and 4 fourths and so on. One day Keelan said, Daddy, I would like 1 half, 1 fourth, and she was looking at it, 1/8, and 2/16, and that adds up to 1. Wow. And she was 2 years old, and she because she had been doing this for a long time, and she's very good with fractions now. She's 13. So anyway, I would say if you just bring numbers into the child's everyday life, then your child is going to learn numbers very well. All right?
I have another question.
Okay. Yes.
It has to do with when do you introduce writing, actual writing?
Oh, okay, good. Very good question. You saw Jacob. In a way, he was writing. He was printing his name or spelling his name. I would introduce writing with letters like that for babies who learn to read because they don't have the physical skill to actually print the letters. So you want to have many letters around the house where they can form the words on their own once they know how to read. Okay? So then you want to find larger writing utensils and teach them how to hold them correctly, which is not that easy to do because they can get into very bad habits. So I wouldn't introduce it too early where they actually physically cannot do it. They can color, they can do all sorts of things, but I wouldn't focus too much on the writing. I would focus more on coloring, making symbols. I wouldn't try to teach that early on where they might get into bad habits of how to hold the writing utensil and also not form the letters correctly and then have to relearn it all later. But to answer the age part, which I did not do, that would vary with every single child based on their physical skills. But we have many children at age 4 who can print very neatly and write long stories.
I wonder if socially your young child succeeds in reading so well and they become so hungry for knowledge through reading. They go to school and everyone around them doesn't. How does it make that child feel? And socially, do they ever feel at a disadvantage? I mean, because they're a minority rather than... And how does the teacher deal with those kind of issues?
Well, initially, I think the benefit is very positive because if you watched all the babies reading, they are verbal, for the most part, earlier than other children. Imagine that you're verbal early on. You get many more opportunities to interact with not only adults, but other children. So early on, I think there's a positive advantage of being able to communicate earlier because you get many more social experiences. As far as being in school, I will agree with you that in school, many schools, depending on where your child is going, there are a smaller number of highly gifted children at the school. But if your child goes to a larger school at some point, for instance, when Alika entered high school, she had many AP classes, the advanced placement classes. That's when she really found, I believe, a lot of her friends because she found many other people who were similar to her academically and their interest and so on. And I think it is easier, not that you can't make friends with everyone, but it is easier when you have other people who have a lot of your same interest or skills.
Hi, my name is Karen. Hi, Dr. Bob.
Hi, Karen.
It's really a pleasure to be here today, and I think that this program is completely fascinating. My question is, I know that you like to start children out at 3 months old. You say that at 3 months old you can introduce the program to them, and I know there's a series of the DVDs that they watch. At what point do you know to move on to the next DVD when the child's 3 months old and not speaking yet?
All right, so a child at age 3 months, you will not get any kind of feedback from the child about if the child can understand any of the words. You need to move on after 1 month regardless. There are about 22 focused or keywords in the starter DVD. I put those same words in volume 1. So in volume 1, the child will still get to see those words. So the child does not need to master the words in the first DVD before moving on. If you did that, that would actually have a very negative effect because then you would stay on the first DVD for 6 months. And in order to really learn to read and to start to figure out many other patterns of the written language, you need to see many words. For instance, we have some really long words in the video and some really short words in the video. If you only watch the first 22 words, then it's harder for you to figure that out than if you see hundreds of words. And how you know is there's a word games part at the end of the DVD, and we'll say something like, can you find the word clap? Which word says wave? And if you see that they get every single word right, then you'll know that you could move on to the next video, even if it hasn't been a full month. But otherwise, I would just stick with the recommended schedule, okay? And as far as starting, since you mentioned 3 months of age, and that's what it says on the package, but when I'm actually talking with people, I tell them it's actually better to start as soon as the baby has visual tracking. So as soon as the baby can follow moving objects with his or her eyes, that's the best time to begin. Now I would like for my daughter Alika to come up, and I would like for you to meet her, and please feel free to ask Alika some questions also. Alika, please come on up. Does anyone have a question for Alika?
Hi there. I'd like to ask you, do you remember learning to read? When you look at those videos, do you remember?
I don't remember actually learning to read, but I remember reading when I was really little. Probably the earliest I remember actually reading is when I was writing a book for my sister. I think my sister was really, really little, and I was writing a book for her birthday, like her first birthday. It was called The Very Friendly Snow Person. And then I just remember writing the story for her and then reading it to her out loud. I must have been like a couple
almost,
years old.
well, no, you must have been 3.
Yeah, I
and
was
almost
3.
4. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So,
amazing.
I think that's the earliest I actually remember. But I remember also, like when I was a kid, a toddler, I would see other babies, and they would be looking at books, and I'd be like, oh, look, the baby's reading a book. Because I would just assume that they were reading like me. So.
Yeah. That's great. Well, thank you.
This kind of goes back to what Marianne asked earlier, but I thought it'd be interesting to get your perspective on how this might have affected you socially and interacting with, other children your age.
Yeah.
Kind of having this, special talent.
Well, actually, a lot of people, once I meet them, people don't know how old I am because I'm ahead in school. And so not until I tell them do they know that I'm younger.
Did you like being ahead in school? I mean,
Yes, I really did.
So.
Everyone, all my classmates would come up to me and they'd be like, oh, you're so lucky. I wish I could have skipped grades. So a lot of my classmates right now, they think I'm like 18 or 19, but I'm only 16. So
you just graduated from high school, right?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
She's also a sophomore in college, believe it or not.
Wow.
I'm transferring next year.
Multitasking.
So.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel like you were under pressure to learn, or was it always very fun for you?
No, it was fun. I didn't really feel like I was, well, I knew I was learning, but it didn't feel like work. Like I know when they teach you in schools, it just feels like work because you have to do it. But then when I was learning, I didn't actually have to, I just wanted to. So.
How did it feel to be able to play longer, have more fun while everyone else had to go and study?
Gosh, I don't know. You mean back when I was in kindergarten?
Well, even like in high school, when you had so much more free time because you either knew it or learned it so quickly.
Oh, yeah. Like a lot of times we'd have to read chapters. Like for my AP class, sometimes we'd have to read like 4 chapters in a night or in a couple days. And then I would just read it really quickly and I would remember it. And then everyone else would like read it out loud to themselves or just like read it really slowly to try and remember it. And so I had time to do other homework and like I had free time just to hang out. So that was nice.
That's great. That's great.
If you had to say one really great thing, I'm sure there's a million, but what's the best thing about learning how to read at an early age?
The thing that immediately comes to mind is that I like to read because I know a lot of people who don't like to read at all. And then I just can't imagine not liking to read because like that's what I do for fun. And so I remember, especially back when I was in middle school, that's the time when a lot of my friends' parents would be pushing them to read, like saying, here, read this classic. And then I'd be like, oh, I love that book. And so, yeah, I just really enjoy it.
I want to ask Alika a question. How many times have I asked you to read a book?
Never.
Never. It's never.
My mom's asked me to stop reading a book and clean my room. So.
I have asked her to read directions, though. When we get games or anything that involves that kind of reading, I just don't like to read directions.
We'll be playing like a new game, like I don't know if you guys have heard of the cranium games, but those have really, really long directions and they're really complicated. And so we'd have game nights, and then everyone would be like, Alika, read the directions and then tell us how to play it.
I'm wondering what your favorite subject is. Being able to read so early, is reading your favorite subject, or?
I'm really interested in philosophy. That's my major. So I think philosophy.
And there's still a lot of reading in that.
Yeah, but yeah, but in high school, I really liked French. I was really good at French, so.
That's awesome. This is kind of for both of you because you seem like a testament that doing these programs and learning to read at an early age isn't going to stifle you from other areas of learning. And I believe I read an article, it was an opinion article about these programs where somebody was talking about how, you know, when kids are that young, you don't need to teach them to read, you need to teach them to say please and thank you. And how do you respond to that? I mean, I think
I love listening to Alika's answers, so I would rather listen to Alika's answers, as I think I'm more impressed with her answers than I am mine. So how would you answer that, Alika?
Well, actually, whenever people come up and tell me it doesn't work, I get sort of like offended almost, because that's how I learned to read, and then they're telling me it doesn't work, and I was like, well, yeah, it does, because that's the only way that I ever learned to read. Like, and since I can obviously read right now, like, for them to say it doesn't work is sort of ridiculous. At least those are my feelings on it.
The focus on that kind of took you away from being able to focus on all the different areas of learning, or did it encourage it or make all the other areas easier? Does that make sense?
Well, actually, yeah, that makes sense. But actually, I think it helped with the other areas of learning just because since I was able to read quicker, I had more time to devote to learning in other areas.
That makes sense.
So.
Yeah, she hasn't really mentioned how quickly she reads, but she reads Harry Potter books in about 2 hours.
I read all of them in a day once.
Yeah, I mean, which is, it takes me, please do not tell me the ending of the last Harry Potter book. I only have 75 pages left, but you know that book came out many months